virtual lounge, and you'll have more time after this next panel to continue networking. We'll keep the virtual lounge open for a whole hour after this panel and let you all continue using that great networking function. I am very pleased to introduce this next panel and simply introduce it, not have any role other than introducing it. Our good friend and La Jolla Conference veteran, Armando Zamora, again, as the director of ANH. Welcome back to La Jolla Conference, Armando. Good to see you. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Carlos Sarmiento, our steering committee member and La Jolla Conference veteran from Quito, with Schlumberger, the managing director for Ecuador, Peru, and Colombia. Carlos, good day, sir.
Thank you, Jeremy. Good morning to all.
Saverio Minervini, who is joining us from one of the outer boroughs in New York. He works for Fitch Ratings. I love saying La Jolla Conference veteran, another La Jolla Conference veteran, and Fitch Ratings, of course, a longstanding partner of the La Jolla Conference. Good to see you, Saverio.
Good to see you as well. Thanks for having me. Hi, everyone.
Manolo Zuniga, who you've been here to La Jolla. It's been a while, but we won't hold that against you. Welcome back, Manolo. He's now with Petrotal as the CEO. And this will be my official handoff, introducing and passing the baton to Jorge Milanese, the head of Latin America for our steering committee member, Sproul, and a good friend and ally, and we appreciate all the support that Sproul gives on the steering committee. Jorge, I am going to hand the microphone to you, and I will turn off my camera and mic and sip some coffee. Please, Jorge, take it away.
All right. Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you, Jeremy, for that fantastic introduction. We are all very excited to have this amazing panel to discuss the Andean region. And I wanted to give you a kind of a foundation of what we want to do today. Psychologists, they say that the human mind cannot track more than 3 things at the same time. So 3 is kind of the magic number here. And we want to discuss in this panel what governments are doing in order, to set up the conditions for the energy companies to do their investments. And so we want to discuss that from the government point of view or the regulation point of view, but also the second aspect will be what the energy companies are doing, how they are doing, what plans are out there in terms of more production, more energy integration between the countries. And the third component here is very important and is becoming even more important. And some people call that ESG. I would say that in Latin America is people. What the communities in the region think about these developments, how we can work with these communities, and there are fantastic examples that our panel can give us today. So let's go to the first subject, which is government and regulation, and it's avoidable to start with Armando. He has been the longest track regulator in Latin America, I believe. Armando started with ANH, and actually, Armando, you founded ANH almost 20 years ago in 2003, if I remember correctly, at the moment in which I think Colombia was at a crossroads. National reserves were dwindling, were declining very quickly. And Colombia looked at the future, and they didn't want to be an oil or gas importing country. So they started a revolution in a different way in Colombia, in the sense of changing the rules, setting up the conditions for which companies may come and invest better in Colombia. So without more introduction, Armando, please tell us how Colombia is doing that, what are the lessons learned, what would be, the best practices that other countries in the regions may take as well. And we almost are, anxious to start receiving your remarks and your comments. So please, Armando, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jorge. Thank you for your kind introduction. Yes, we started working on the new institutional architecture and the new regulatory system for Colombia even before 2000. I think it was 1999 when prices were low, production in Colombia was falling, investment wasn't coming, and the social situation was so difficult that there was no interest in Colombia at all. So yes, we had to review best practices worldwide, and this is very important because the government and Ecopetrol needed financing, and that's the key. A proposal that was made by a group of academics, I was part of that group back in 1999, was taken on board by President Uribe in 2002, and Ecopetrol, from within Ecopetrol, they saw the institutional reform as a way to strengthen Ecopetrol, liberate it from the public finances, allowing Ecopetrol to raise capital without raising the level of indebtedness of the country. So it was very clearly in the interest of Ecopetrol to free itself from the administration of the resource and become acting as a private company with private capital. And for that, they had to create a body for the administration of the resource. And that was the ANH. That was the idea, to strengthen Ecopetrol, but at the same time to create an independent, well, it's generically called a regulator, but it's really an administrator of the resource, a delegated administrator of the resource that, like in much of Latin America, owns the resource. The state owns the resource. So the National Hydrocarbons Agency is delegated to administer those resources and optimize its the development and the monetization of those resources. So that's what really led to this reform. In our case, it was, as you said, the country was at a crossroads, in a fiscal crisis and foreign investment crisis, and it was the crisis that led to this reform, which turned out to be beneficial for everybody. Beneficial for the state, for the macroeconomic, from the public finances, for the macroeconomic situation, and also turned out to be very beneficial for Ecopetrol. So everybody won in this reform. And so far, lessons learned, many. At the beginning, the country had very little knowledge of its real prospectivity. The areas with known prospectivity, the best areas, were maintained by Ecopetrol. And I have said many times, the agency was administering the areas where there was no known prospectivity. So that was our first task, to invest very heavily. I mean, it was really substantial. And we got the backing of the Ministry of Finance. Thanks to there was one concession that reverted to the ministry, and the ministry gave it back to the ANH, so we had our own income. And we invested very heavily in the acquisition of new information to explore the prospectivity. And that is one of the best investments that the country has done, because even if we have invested about probably $1 billion, the benefits of the new reserves that have been found, about $5 billion, are equivalent today of 1 GDP per year. Because we managed to illuminate the new potential in what is now the heavy oil, the unconventionals, the offshore. I mean, that's lesson number one. Lesson number two, when we opened the door for all kinds of companies, large, medium, and small, Small companies bring with them a lot of challenges and a lot of problems. They are much more vulnerable to the swings of price, the swings of the situation, and probably the situation now is so different that we have known prospectivity, a well-established system, a well-established base of companies, small, medium, and large, with capacity to operate, but we are still left with a number of small companies with a lot of problems, which create lots of administration headaches. It's important to keep it in mind. We are dealing with them, we are helping them, we are finding ways, but a lot of time of the administration goes into those marginal companies. So there has been like big. I'm going to cut it now because I can go on forever. But we are looking carefully in how to maintain the space open for small companies, but avoiding the type of problems that we have so far. I think the administration work today also, another lesson learned is that Ecopetrol, the national oil company, needs to be an ally of the new, of the new institutional framework, because they are the ones who benefit most from it. It has to be clear for them and for the workers. The national oil companies are like national treasures that are very protected. You cannot try, we couldn't even try to affect their assets or their operations or their prospects or their growth. They have been reinforced. They have also had an internal transformation. It's a very professional company. The system of governance is world class. It's a nice, a good, strong national oil company, and we manage, or we administer, about half of the production and half of the areas, but they still maintain their very important role in the country. I will stop there to give space to more opinions about this.
Okay, no, fantastic. That is a very good summary of what happened. Before I let you go, I wanted to ask you also of the second evolution, because ANH has been very successful compared to other countries in Latin America by conducting regular bid rounds. Very recently, ANH have launched the permanent bid round auction. And I want to give you the opportunity to explain a little bit about how it's working, if it is up to your expectations, and also if you can tell us a little bit about another good idea, which is what you call the Little League or the B League in terms of auctions.
The permanent process for area allocation, how it's called, let's say it's a technical name, is a process whereby the country is permanently open for the nomination of areas. Any company at any time can nominate one area, and regularly, so far every year, the agency organizes a bidding round with a combination where the agency offers those areas that have been nominated and areas that the agency nominates itself, that the agency selects as areas with good potential and prepare information packages and offer them to the public. This year, for example, we are going to offer about 28 areas directly for auction. And we have already 2 nominations of areas, and we expect more. But it's a mixed product. What's the difference between an area that is nominated by a company and an area nominated by the ANH? That the area nominated by the company is also open for bids, but the nominator has the first right of refusal, can equalize the best offer, and has that right to retain the area if they think that they can match a better offer that they make. there is a minimum offers in terms of points. We basically more or less is one exploration well. So that's how it's working. It has worked well. We have been improving and making it more straightforward and making it more safe so it can be done remotely. We have adopted a blockchain mechanism where companies deposit their offers in a safe blockchain box and they open it at the auction remotely. This is optional, it's not mandatory. If companies want to send the representatives with the envelopes, they will be accepted as well. So it's quite flexible. And well, last year we did the trial run. Last year was difficult. We didn't want to stop the system. We wanted to take the opportunity to try the blockchain. So we had 2 companies that nominated and bid for 4 areas. 3 were finally accepted and they were allocated to those companies. We didn't have those 28 areas we were studying. We're not ready, but we are releasing them now. So that's how it's working. And we are trying to streamline. It's still for approval, but we will try to let companies who are already qualified to extend their qualifications without having to provide new financial information. So that will, for this year, it was temporary given the current circumstances. So we will cut a little bit the red tape. And new companies who want to register and pre-qualify can bring also their financial information from 2019. 2020 was a very bad year for everybody. So we are allowing for 2019. We are making let's say an innovative proposal of a contract which divides the contract in 2 stages. One is exploration, another was production, but with the option to engage in a production contract if there is a discovery and if all conditions of the exploration are met. It's an innovation also to streamline the administration, to make a clean cut, and to avoid the dozens of problems that we are having with companies that retain the whole area without meeting their obligations and taking them from the system. We have some companies which have done nothing for 15 or 18 years, and we cannot release the areas. That is not good for anybody. So a clean cut, 6 years, you explore, basically total freedom. You do what you want, you drill if you want. If you have a discovery, you have the right to a contract. If you do nothing, we won't chase you, but the area will be free. That's the proposal is being discussed. If we agree, we will introduce it this year. If we don't, we maintain the old system. But it's a heavy burden for everybody. That new system could be a door for smaller companies, B-League, to enter into exploration. And as long as they meet their obligation, which are very straightforward, as long as they have a discovery, they will have the right to a production contract. But that comes later. As I said, we are trying to maintain the doors open, but avoiding the problems that they bring. So it's a little bit squaring of a circle, but I think we are finding a way.
Okay, fantastic, Armando. No, thank you for that. It's a very nice overview of what I would call the gold standard in order to do bid rounds. And Colombia has been imitated, but never surpassed. I really congratulate you on all these efforts.
I don't know. I think Mexico did really well.
Yes, yeah, it was a good head start, right? But,
I think they even did better than us. But
well, they stopped. Let's see if they can have the long track record that Colombia has.
Yes.
Can I ask Armando a question?
Sure, absolutely, yeah.
On that last initiative, and I like what you're saying, small companies usually struggle to put performance bonds because they don't have cash flow. Therefore, for them, a performance bond is like having cash in the bank so they can get the performance bond. Under what you're saying, you don't have to put a performance bond till you get an area for exploration. Because it's always the catch-22. You don't know what, in Peru, you're committed to drill a well. You have to put a performance bond, and you really don't know for sure if you're gonna drill or not. So
it's a halfway solution. You don't have to put the performance bonds, but you will have to pay an entry fee.
Okay.
That will be returned if you drill a well. If not, then you start.
Mm-hmm. Good.
It's all in the making. It's work in progress. We will come to
It's a good development. Yeah. Before we go to Ecuador and Peru, I wanted to ask Saverio. Hopefully, I'm not surprising you, but you have from your position, from analyzing, the performance of so many companies and governments in certain cases, and unique perspective on the region. So, could you give us in a few sentences a summary of how, from the financing perspective, the Andean region is performing for the outside world?
That's a little bit of a complicated question. It's a complicated question. It varies. I mean, we have some precedent this year, right? We saw a company called Geopark kind of do a liability management exercise and was able to do a reopening and get ultimately better terms of their financing. So that was viewed. It seems that, I mean, recently it's a little more complicated because there's political risk that's being kind of built into the bonds, right? So you had in Peru, with the election, there was some volatility that we saw where bonds were pricing almost at distressed levels. And then in Colombia, there was a little more bullish. Bonds were trading at par. And then unfortunately, we have some protests as well. There is committed capital. I mean, we haven't seen any situation yet where companies have not been able to access capital either locally or internationally, either in the bank market or in the bond market. But that being said, it's on pause at the moment. I do expect that companies are just going to wait. I think the investor community wants to see what happens in the election and kind of get more tangible perspective before they invest. That being said, I can tell you within the Andean region and the companies that we cover, companies are solid cash flow, good balance sheets, and have room to grow. But again, themselves are sitting back and waiting a little bit.
Well, thank you for that, Saverio. It's always very nice to check, with the reality of what we can do in terms of financing, which for sure is one of the major hurdles for all the companies in South America. Carlos, you come from a different perspective or experience in Ecuador, right? While Ecuador wasn't holding frequent, bid rounds, they do have bid rounds from time to time, and your company has been successful participating in those bid rounds and operating in Ecuador. You tell us more what was about this bid round, what was the experience, what you can highlight also as a good practice, and what is the perspective in Ecuador in particular on future bid rounds?
Thank you, Jorge. I would like to start by highlighting that probably Ecuador is living a moment in a way similar to the one that Colombia lived some time ago. I think the compelling events are there. I think the recently appointed government is under the right intention to increase the investment in the country, in the industry. The industry is fundamental for the macroeconomics of the country. So all those things are there. And I think, I was listening very carefully because I not only admire, but I study the work done from Armando. And I think, and I agree with you that countries in Latin America have had a lot to learn from what has been done in Colombia. There are a big number of lessons that can be taken out of that. I was reading very carefully this point about the need that any transformation needs to happen from inside the national oil company, with acceptance of all of them, because we passed recently for the creation of the JV between Petroamazonas and Petroecuador, the fusion between the two to become one company that is Petroecuador now, and but still a little things, a big number of things need to happen, right? So having said that, talking about our own experience, we have in a way been successful on aligning the objectives of the country with the objectives of the company, and being able to create value along the past 8 years that we have had contracts in. We are not directly the operator. The operator continues to be Petroecuador, but we are doing all the work in a way, right? We are bringing technology, we are bringing knowledge, we are doing all the field development in a big portion of the Petroecuador production. It's probably 35% of the total Petroecuador production that is in our hands one way or another. So what needs to be learned, in my opinion, and thinking on the previous rounds done by the Ecuadorian government, are probably summarized in one word, which is transparency. I think the lesson learned is pointing towards that, and that transparency, we can look into some of the examples in Colombia. Transparency on the data, access to data to all of the participants, transparency on the timeline, to have a clear understanding when the rounds are going to happen, and what opportunities do the investors have. Transparency as well on how the policy is going to play regarding environmental challenges and regarding social challenges. I was looking into the comment from Armando regarding these small companies that probably are having issues to execute. That could be part of the problem. Probably we need to be a little bit more demanding regarding the what is required for the companies to participate and be able to cover the social license and the environmental license and all these things. So all of that is part of lessons learned that I can think. A typical example where this policy or this alignment is playing a role. The last round in Ecuador happened probably almost 3 years ago. It was probably successful from the commercial perspective, but none of the winners have been able to start executing because there is a lack of environmental permits awarding. Things are not aligned, are not connected. So all these things are affecting the real success of the rounds, right? So in summary, a lot to learn. And I think it is time for Ecuador and for the government to do something important to change the direction that the industry is going, and really make this industry part of the economical success, the financial success of the country in the long run. That's my thank you.
Thank you, because you not only answer one of the questions that we received in the chat, but also you pointed out to something very important, which is how to really execute in that environment. And I think it's an excellent segue to ask Manolo how they are doing that, because PetroTal is a company that went from 0 to 13,000 barrels per day of production in a couple of years in the north of Peru, operating in the jungle, where relationship with communities have always been complex. I wouldn't say bad, but complex and difficult to manage. So, Manolo, tell us how you're doing this. Where is the secret sauce?
Well, we just completed a new well. We have not drilled a well for more than a year because of the pandemic. And of course, production had dropped during that time. And now we're back above 10,000 barrels of production again our plan this year is to end the year close to 20,000 barrels per day. And I think we should be able to achieve that if, and that's where the big if is, we have social peace in the jungle. And that's a big if, as you can imagine. And when we started working in the jungle, we started the company at the end of 2017. As you mentioned, Jorge, we executed very well. In Peru, PetroTal, that is listed in Toronto and London exchanges, is known as the company that is led and operated by Peruvians. And that goes a long way, as you can imagine. We have a team, the senior technical team is ex-Oxy, that used to have what used to be known as Block 1AB, now is Block 192. And that block at one time was producing, more than 75,000 barrels of oil per day. Now it's being shut since February of last year because of social unrest. And in the jungle, we have Block 8, that used to be Plus Petrols, also shut down because partly social unrest. Block 64, that GeoPark was at one time a partner of Petroperu, following a discovery by Oxy, shut down also because of social unrest. So it's only Perenco and us working. So it's truly a pity that Peru nowadays produces, I was looking at Peru Petrol's website, 36,000 barrels of crude oil production. That's it. It produces about twice as much of condensate, so about 110,000 of liquids, and another 200,000 of equivalent of gas. And most of the liquids and most of the gas come from Camisea, as you can imagine. And so, how is that we're managing to go back to drilling, maintaining the peace? Something that we have always promoted in our operations is the idea of the empowerment of the local communities. And usually when you tell people about empowerment, they go, well, you don't want to give them power, because they're going to drive you nuts. They say, no, on the contrary, they need to feel that they're managing their destiny. That you cannot be always, catering to them. These people are smarter than anybody else. And I always tell people in Peru, especially with the government, if you go to the jungle, you won't last a week probably. These guys, flourish in the jungle. They're smarter than anybody else. How come they cannot be empowered? So let's work on that. So we've been working on that concept of empowerment. In Peru, you probably have seen that there is the law of the canon. And like in many other countries, they share the government revenues with the communities. In Peru, the canon sometimes is based on income tax. It could be based on the royalties, and depending what canon is, mining, gas. For oil, amazingly, is based on the value of production. It's 18.75% of the value of the production supposed to go to the communities. So you wonder, wow, if they get so much money, there should be peace, should be no issue. But when I started getting involved in this project, and we were increasing production, and I could see things brewing, and I thought, what the heck is going on? And I asked, how much is the Bretaña community, where we have the Bretaña oil field, getting out of that 18.75%? Keeping in mind that nowadays we produce in the jungle 75% of the oil, and they get only 0.33%. And they go, okay, well, now I see why, people complain. So there's been pollution in the past, and they have not gotten any money. This kind has been ongoing for 20-some years. It goes to Iquitos, the capital of the Amazon jungle, and it stays there, basically. It doesn't go to the communities where, and we are having to revert that. So I've been a big promoter and have had very tense discussions with the ministers that, the basic concept is give them the money. It's their money. That canon was set up to replenish what comes out as a non-renewable resource. So it's their money. It's in their land. Give them their money. And I've been pushing that. I'm glad to see that last Saturday, Keiko Fujimori proposed giving the 40% of the canon directly to the people. And funny enough, about 40% of the canon is usually wasted or not used in Peru. So you can get a sense now how one is sort of forced to get a little bit into even politics, but with the concept of empowering the local communities. So last year we had unrest, unfortunately, but once all of the blocks had shut down and the pipeline had shut down, then they came to us from the northern part of the jungle and they shut our field. Otherwise, we would have been continued producing because they do see in us a company, again, led and operated by Peruvians that truly want to make a difference, and we are doing it. We are a long way to go, but now I'm bringing the help of the indigenous federations so we can work together and then pushing the government. So I basically went to the side of the indigenous federations and then together pushing the government to get things done. And I'm hopeful that we can do that. The president of Peru Petro always talks about that the jungle can go back to producing 100,000 barrels of oil per day. I'm the other guy that truly believes that if all of the blocks are working together, you could create a lot of jobs, and the cannon could go. Last year was 20 million soles. It could go to 1 billion soles per year. And you can imagine the amount of wealth that will create if it is properly distributed among the communities. So now, I don't want to take more time. This is something very passionate for me, as you can imagine, because we want to make a difference. We want to grow the company. We want to make sure that our shareholders and all of the capital comes from outside, except friends and family that put money in the company initially. It's all foreign capital, risk capital. We did bonds, $100 million in bonds early in the year. We met with a few funds from Peru, Brazil, Chile. None put a penny. It all comes from Europe, Asia, US. So the foreign investors continue to trust the vision of the company of making a difference while making money for everybody. And that's what we're trying to do.
Fantastic, Manolo. That is an excellent summary of how a company can be very successful in Peru or elsewhere in Latin America. It's a very nice blueprint on how to do things. I wanted to go back to Saverio to get his remarks on how important is these ESG factors when it comes to financing, when it comes to making decisions, or even rating companies on how they are doing and how they are performing.
In summary, very important. Actually, to piggyback off of what Manolo said, we actually had some examples in Peru where investors were asking particularly about some projects in the Amazon, and they wanted to understand kind of what the environmental impacts are of those projects. So there is an unconditional kind of focus on this. To be frank, you usually have two meetings, one talking about the finance and the strategy, and then one just talking about ESG. It's an evolving, as far as all the companies we rate, it is a focus. We're now starting to see a lot of them publicly publish a sustainability reports. A lot of them are work in progress, but it's an area of focus, and investors are highly focused on it as well. We haven't seen necessarily kind of where it's been, and I'm not the banker here, but there is some studies that we've seen that there is merit as far as cost savings when you are an ESG compliant or friendly company in the pricing of your bond. But the way we generally are applying it now, and again, this is an evolving science, is that we look at the ESG factor and determine whether it is a key rating driver of the company. One way to look at it is like it's kind of a defense, if you will, right? We had some situations not in the Andes where a company may have been investigated under corruption, in which case that is a factor that would impact the governance and the ESG score of a company. We also have situations where if you had some type of disruption to your operations due to environmental or case in point, I can make the example in Vale with the dam collapsing in Brazil, where there's kind of an ESG event that impacts the rating. So we do analyze, we give like an ESG score, kind of 0 to 5, 4 and 5, meaning that they're material factors in your rating, and then 3 and below, essentially saying that it's important, but it's not a key rating, it's not a driver of your rating. But at the moment, the ESG scores are meant to reflect if the ESG is a risk for the company.
Very good. Yeah. Obviously, this is becoming a key factor for getting financing all over the world, and Latin America is no exception to that. Switching gears, I want to go to production, to what companies are doing, a little bit of outlook in terms of oil and gas. Carlos, can you tell us in a few sentences how is the production going in Ecuador? How do you see that increasing? Is there a possibility of natural gas production in Ecuador? I read yesterday that Petroecuador, which is now back to be one company, Petroamazonas and Petroecuador, they merged together. They achieve again 400,000 barrels per day of production. So I think that things are starting to turn in the corner on Ecuador, but please give us your perspective.
Thank you, Jorge. Production has been kept in the order of 500,000 probably for the past decade almost, which is definitely not a success, especially if you consider that it has been an important greenfield development coming from Tiputini and Tambococha, two important fields. So most of the effort has been on trying to maintain the production, and it has not been increased. So I go back to the first question, and I think a lot needs to happen in policy alignment, into creating the right strategy and towards increasing production, because it's definitely possible. It can be done in both ways. It can be done addressing the existing contracts and finding ways to increase production through the existing contracts, and it can also be done by bringing a participation model in order to favor exploration that has been almost non-existent for a big number of years. So, but the potential is there. The reserves are there. The infrastructure is there. The geological risk is probably one of the lowest in the region. So it is absolutely possible. Just all these things that I mentioned need to be properly aligned. The Ministry of Environment needs to be aligned with the Ministry of Hydrocarbons, understanding the role they play, so that things keep moving. All these things are important. The social aspect, ESG is fundamental. This needs to be incorporated properly in the rounds and in the contracts, because is the way it goes, right? So yeah. But answering your question specifically, production has not increased. Actually, dropped almost 10% year on year, and something serious needs to happen in order to move forward. And natural gas is very little what we produce, just on a field in the coast near to the border with Peru offshore, and but nothing has been done in exploration. So I think the opportunity is open, right?
Thank you, Carlos. Armando, can you give us an overview of what's happening in Colombia regarding production, both in terms of oil and natural gas, and how do you see that evolving into the next years?
Production fell last year because of the pandemic and the financial situation of companies, and this year has been stable around 750,000 barrels per day. And that production will only increase when companies are allowed to go back and do their maintenance, workover, and investment in development. and that is slowly happening. We have a plan, companies have a plan this year to go almost back to normal in terms of investment, but the result of that investment in production and in exploration will be seen probably towards the end of the year or next year. So production is recovering slowly. Companies are having good, because of prices, are having better than expected income. Sometimes their headquarters would like to have that cash closer to them. But as far as we know, this year we have investment is coming back. In terms of gas, production has been stable around 1 billion cubic feet per day, and 1,000 million cubic feet per day, a billion cubic feet per day. And gas doesn't seem to be a problem. There's going to be enough reserves. We only have problems when there are events, out of seasonal events that require some imports. But so far the results of exploration for gas have been very encouraging, but there's a lot of uncertainty. So the government has a plan to build a regasification plant in the Pacific, which is going ahead despite a lot of opposition from the incumbents. But gas, I think the prospects for gas are very encouraging in the north coast, offshore and onshore, and also in unconventionals.
And ANH is going to put for bid also some exploration blocks on the Pacific margin as well, right? On the next bid round. This is expectation of finding natural gas there as well.
Well, it's early to tell, but oil or gas, those blocks are actually for technical evaluation. It's very early in terms of the knowledge of those basics. So those are for technical evaluation. In parallel, we are focusing or directing most of our exploration investments to those areas for technical reasons, but also for social reasons. It looks like an area with a huge potential, but very difficult to access because of surface problems with communities, with security, with the environment. So it's one of the toughest areas, but we are going ahead of the pack. We have had some attempts to explore in the Pacific with very good preliminary results from the seismic and all the other techniques, but terrible problems, dealing with the whales. I mean, big whales that come to mate and give birth and die in those waters. So the restrictions have to be observed.
It's a very important point. It's a good perspective on the challenges that normally offshore exploration encounters. And I want to go back to Manolo on that because he has a lot of experience doing exploration and starting production in the offshore of Peru. And it's something that normally is not very well known. But Manolo, you already told us, gave us a very good perspective of production in Peru. But I wanted to ask you about the future of exploration in Peru. I heard this week the division of promotion of Peru Petro mentioning that they will put for bid eventually around 900 prospects, 3 billion barrels of oil equivalent available. And I want to receive your perspective and your comments on the exploration potential of Peru, both in oil and gas, onshore and offshore.
Yeah, Peru unfortunately has been unexplored. The eastern side of the jungle is huge, and there's so little exploration per se. Even offshore, Peru Petro has actually invested in acquiring new seismic to entice companies to come in. The permitting process in Peru is so difficult that it's so difficult to plan ahead and be able to like, Exxon is doing in Guyana, they drill one well, another one, another one, another one, another one, and everything is well planned. In Peru, it's extremely difficult. And the government doesn't understand, how those delays to obtain permits and the complexity to get the permit, it's a discouragement for people. And Armando was talking about the whales. I had a Block Z1 in the shallow waters in Tumbes, adjacent to Ecuador. We did a 3D seismic survey, and the seismic vessel will stop whenever we detected a whale or dolphins. I think it was 100 meters away. And so the vessel had to stop very often, as you can imagine. But we kept things, oil company, safety first, and not only for our employees, but even the wildlife, and we were successful doing it. So it can be done. It can be done. It takes extra time, but the issue is getting those permits on time. In the Amazon jungle, there is still quite a bit of potential. Even on our Block 95, where we have the Bretaña oil field, you can look at our presentations. We have a number of leads, and actually one small prospect that we want to do additional seismic to drill. And of course, we have to not only manage the environmental side and the timing of the permits, but also the social issues, which again, I'm hoping that soon enough we'll be able to get everybody well aligned. Block 107, where we see the possibility of finding a light oil, very light oil, 40-45 API gravity. We have a prospect that has 500 million of potential reserves. So it's actually quite exciting, as you can imagine. You go south towards Bolivia, you have already a discovery, the Candamo discovery done by Mobil, that has also a few TCF of known gas that needs to be developed. So it is this convolution of permit, social issues, and ideas from some of the government officials that don't let the industry really, grow. And the importance is that everybody needs to be working at the same time to entice companies like Schlumberger to come in and provide more resources. Schlumberger is doing a fantastic job with us with these long horizontals that we're drilling. And we set up these AICD valves to control the water inflow, and they're fantastic wells that we've been able to do it. But Halliburton already left, so you don't have even the support from all of the companies. And so lots of potential. And I wish we had Armando working in Peru, to put things in order. Peru Petro is trying his best. I know Seferino, the president of Peru Petro, is trying his best. He's actually building up the team, more technical, to be able to encourage. But then you have the environmental ministry that needs to provide the permits on a consistent basis, So
greetings to Seferino. He's a very good friend. Thank you for that, Manolo. I think that one other point that is important in general for the Andean region is integration. Integrations in many different forms. There are some examples of integration, but I want to quickly go around the panel and ask your views about the integration. We have in the region countries that are net exporters and countries that are net importers, and obviously that creates opportunities. So, Armando, do you want to go first?
Okay. Yeah, I've had to study this integration issue some years ago with our ministry and other ministries and some universities. And we found that integration is difficult because even though it looks like a straightforward thing to do where everybody gains, there are so many private interests in every country that is very difficult to keep everybody happy. Colombia has been historically a country which is very rich in energy, in hydro, in gas, in oil, and always willing to integrate. And is promoting the electrical integration with Central America, with South America, with Venezuela, all our neighbors. But the difficulties are terrible because every time you want to integrate, somebody loses and somebody wins. For example, you want to sell energy to Panama, but there are, economic groups that import the gas and distribute the gas, and they don't want to be left out. So why bother? Why bring cheaper electricity from Colombia if we can have the gas market in Panama? Ecuador, we had a very good electrical integration, but the Ecuadorians wanted to. It was very difficult to explain to the Ecuadorians, but that was former government, that our exports to Ecuador make everybody in Colombia to pay a little bit more for their energy. So we need some clawback. And that wasn't accepted by Ecuador because our energy is traded in the market. When there is higher demand from Ecuador, the market price goes up and every pays a little bit more to bring that energy to Ecuador. Ecuador wanted to pay less than that. And the conclusion was that, Venezuela, we started to export gas to Venezuela. We met our commitments. We exported the volumes that we were committed to export. And then after that, we were counting on Venezuelan gas, which has the highest reserves in Latin America of gas, and they haven't been able to send the gas back. I had the opportunity to meet Hugo Chavez discussing that issue. And he said to President Uribe, "You shouldn't worry, we have the biggest reserves in the world." President Uribe said, "No, it's not a matter of having the reserves. It's a matter of being able to bring the reserves to market." And he explained how we had very little reserves. But with those very little reserves, we had, at the time, 3 million homes, 500,000 vehicles, thermal generation on gas, and we were exporting to Venezuela. So it's so difficult. The other conclusion, I'm going to cut short because the other conclusion I had is there are so many frictions between neighbors in our neighborhood that integration with fixed infrastructure is very difficult. And you start north to south, Venezuela and Colombia keep fighting all the time. Ecuador and Peru also have many differences to integrate. Peru and Bolivia, no mention. Bolivia and Peru and Chile or Argentina. So if someone builds the infrastructure, there is no guarantee that the commitments, that the agreements, that the contract will be fulfilled. So my conclusion at one point was that integration would be easier in gas with LNG, with the flexibility to divert the cargoes or bring cargoes from somewhere else. It's a very complex problem, but I would say if we manage to integrate, everybody will win, especially the consumers. But so many interests, it is difficult to keep everybody happy.
It's incredible, Armando, because I was listening the previous panel on the Southern Corn, and the panel discussed exactly the same, that the Southern Corn is very integrated. Bolivia and Argentina and Chile, Argentina and Brazil, Uruguay, etc. But when you sell natural gas, you sell the molecule and you sell trust at the same time. And when you don't have trust, you don't have any more export, right? So the previous panel were discussing the same, that sometimes it's easier to do integration through LNG or through electrons, like the CIEPAC in the north of Colombia or with Central America. But there are some examples. You already touched on the natural gas pipeline with Venezuela that hopefully gets reverted in the next cycle, and you will have more natural gas flowing from Venezuela to to Colombia. There is
And
also
by the time we will have plenty of gas, so we may not need it.
well, it's only a matter of cost. Let's see who has a lower cost. Yeah, exactly. I wanted to mention that there is another integration that for me has been critical and is going to prove perhaps a very good bridge between the two countries, and it's the integration in the south of Colombia with the north of Ecuador for heavy. Ecuador has a trunk line just built for heavy crude oil, which is a luxury in Latin America, but very needed in Ecuador. And that integration has proved tremendously successful, not only for Colombia, but for Ecuador as well. And with that, I wanted to go to Carlos to receive his perspective.
Before that,
Carlos,
I'm sorry,
yeah.
but I failed to mention that. I had it in my script, but you mentioned it.
Okay. No problem. No problem. I covered that for you.
Thank you.
No. But Carlos, you have a lot of experience, not only in Ecuador, but in the region. You have worked from Alaska to Patagonia. So I'm sure that you have many examples and many, observations to share regarding integration.
No, thank you, Jorge. No, a couple of comments. I attended the previous panel as well, and I really felt it, what was mentioned there, and Armando concluded. So I will be like the pragmatic and naive at the same time, no? So I will try to be that. So the first example that you brought, yes, it has been successful to transport Colombian oil using the OCP in Ecuador. And that was a very big achievement, because they even have to pass a big number of trucks through the border and find a way to do it. So it's a very nice story when there is alignment on the objectives. I think it can happen. So Odesio Done was saying in the previous panel that probably the way to do it is ad hoc, and I think we have a big number of opportunities to do ad hoc integration. One could be, the Talara refinery in Peru. There is opportunity to Ecuadorian oil to use that refinery. That could be one. The development and the exploration and development of the southeast of Ecuador. The round could probably be more attractive if we integrate the Peruvian infrastructure as part of the solution. Another example will be the development of the Putumayo fields in Colombia, using the infrastructure in Ecuador at the north. The industrial center in Ecuador is much closer to Putumayo fields than Putumayo fields are to any other industrial center in Colombia. So the gas could be another one, between Peru and Ecuador. So ad hoc could be many. And I agree with Armando. It depends on aligning the stars and the interest. So playing the role of the pragmatic naive, I think it could be possible to do something. Yeah.
I may add also, following what Armando was saying about the clawback on power prices. When I had the Block Z1 in the shallow waters of Tumbes next to Ecuador, the plan was to put a gas to power project, and it'll be connected to the Peruvian grid. And then when we tried to also hook it up to Ecuador, then we ended up with that clawback. And so because we were so close to Ecuador, we decided that, okay, in the eventuality we are selling to Ecuador, we are actually out of the Peruvian grid. So therefore, that clawback will not exist. So that's how we were trying to get around that. And it took forever. At the end, that project did not happen. We also found shallow gas onshore in Tumbes, which now another company has it. He's a good friend of mine. We're actually looking to joint venture, and he's thinking about doing CNG to take it to Cuenca, to take it to Guayaquil. It's a great idea. We tried that also in the past when Correa decided that any trucks coming from Peru, we will have to unload into Ecuadorian trucks before going to final market in Ecuador, and vice versa. It was a hassle. And we have suffered some, I see Carlos going like that, because we have to do that with the equipment that we bring from Ecuador for our jungle operations. But it looks like that's going to be resolved. So the politicians, create trouble, for no reason. Nowadays, some of the politicians, the other candidate of the Peruvian elections talking about bringing gas from Bolivia to Peru when Peru has so much gas. It doesn't make any sense. But it's all about politics again. So unfortunately, politics messes things up completely, but the clawback on the energy, the same happens in Peru.
Manolo, thank you for that. 2 words regarding the North Peruvian pipeline, and particularly on your views on a possible integration with the south of Ecuador. If Ecuador goes back to bid rounds, there is a lot of potential in the south of Ecuador for exploration, and a natural outlet could be through the North Peruvian pipeline. So how do you see that?
Well, both governments have already signed several MOUs about that. I think as recently as a few months ago, that yes, let's go ahead and do that. We paid about $8 to $10 a barrel to use the pipeline. So the more throughput, and better for everybody because the tariff should drop. So I'm all for that. The pipeline needs some investments to upgrade for the heavier oils. But I think doubling the throughput right now, assuming the Block 192 and the Perenco block and oil produced January of last year, the jungle was producing about 30,000 barrels of oil, and it needs to have twice as much to really for Petroperu to lower the tariffs. That will be very helpful, and of course with social peace. The reason that we were able to get the bonds early in the year was that we had done an initial shipment via Brazil to the U.S. And that's how we convinced the bond holders to put the money. Otherwise, they were not going to risk given the unknowns of the oil pipeline in Peru. But that's a great idea. We support that. And we support also having Petrotal on the other side doing that exploration, of course.
Of course, yeah. No, it would be fantastic to have these opportunities. And thank you for the example of exporting via Brazil. I think it's a good example of how entrepreneurial companies can overcome challenges and can produce value for everybody. So, Saverio, help me to bring this home with some last remarks regarding integration from your point of view, from your perspective.
Yeah, don't have much more to add besides what has already been said, but I guess a couple of points. One, I think I agree with I think as far as gas integration, it's going to be LNG. I think a good opportunity is between Peru and Colombia, right? Colombia is building this regasification facility and, has some limited reserves at the moment, but enough. So then there could be partnerships, obviously, between Peru being a net exporter and Colombia being a net importer. So that's one development. The second point is we're seeing real commitment and money being spent in oil development in the northern part of Ecuador and in Putumayo. So we might see we're going to see some integration. The companies that have won bids in Ecuador also operate in Putumayo, and they have plans that we're seeing to kind of integrate them and try to realize economies of scale. So that's an area that I would pay attention. And then my last point is, I think I'm the corporate analyst, so I'm not the sovereign analyst. But of course, there's political risk. There's I know geographic challenges, engineering challenges. But that being said, there are regional integrated energy companies that operate in all these countries, right? And you have a lot of them, and you have companies in Colombia that have assets throughout the Andes, not just in Colombia. And vice versa. So there is real intel and kind of expertise and companies that are maybe headquartered in Colombia, but that operate in all these markets. So integration can be possible, but it's probably going to be expensive and difficult. But if there's an opportunity, I think there's the right companies are there to kind of make good on those opportunities, I would say.
Fantastic, thank you. I think it's a very good summary. So let's see if we can call back Jeremy, because Jeremy has one last question for all of you. And this is kind of a tradition in the La Jolla conference. So Jeremy, are you there?
I'm here. I think I heard Armando wanting to. Did you want to make
I saw a couple of questions in the chat.
Okay.
I could briefly address, if you allow me.
Please, yeah, I'll continue to develop my yes or no question while you do that.
Yes, my good friends Roger Tissot and Milton Chavez has made a couple of questions that I think we can address briefly. Roger asks, how are we going to reconcile the opening of our acreage to smaller companies with all the challenges that come with the license to operate? And I would just say that is precisely the square that the square that we want to circle, or circle that square, because that's where smaller companies have the most problems, dealing with the communities and dealing with the subcontractors. So and it's too early to tell, but we need to make sure that they are able to meet all their commitments, not only in terms of exploration investment, but also social and environmental, before we reopen the door to them. Absolutely. That's the responsible thing to do, and not to open the doors without looking at those problems. And to Milton Chavez quickly, and that's a very easy one to respond. If we communicate regularly with ANLA to ensure that they review and act expeditiously in the attention to applications for environmental licenses. And the answer is yes. I know there has been a gap, in former governments. Government institutions didn't speak to each other because they belong to different bosses. But now the government is working in a very coordinated way, and we have a network of formal alliances, formal agreements, one of them with ANLA, whereby we provide all the resources that they need. They maintain their independence, but they will react expeditiously, sorry my pronunciation, to the demands or requests from industry. And it is now up and running, and anything they need, we will provide, and it is working relatively well, like it used to work during the ANH 1.0 under President Uribe. So we are back to that, to working in coordination with other institutions, not only for environmental, but also social communities, and so on and so forth.
Thank you. No, please. It's always important we answer Milton Chavez's question, especially. He's probably the longest term attending La Jolla conference. He dropped off after he left ExxonMobil, or retired. He didn't leave. But thank you, Armando. So thank you. Round of applause. Wonderful panel. Although you're not done yet, I guess I have to do my Jorge is insisting. Okay, Jorge. So let's do this. I think it was very interesting, the question we posed to the last panel at the end. So let me ask it for you all. Andes region, but Latin America more broadly, long-term energy future is A, electricity, B, natural gas, C, hydrogen. Armando, you first.
It can be all of the above, or it has to be one of those?
Okay, you're adding D, all of the above.
Yes, because I don't see that the future of energy and this transition process will actually leave any of the options out. It will be a slow process. Hydrogen will be in the matrix, but electricity and gas as well. Okay. So,
D. All right, I'm not officially adding D to my list. So Severio, staying with A, B, and C. Electricity, natural gas, or hydrogen. I know Fitch has papers on all of this.
Yes, I would say natural gas, parentheses, LNG is my vote.
And by the way, do check out all of our sponsors, collaborators. We've got on the lounge that we're about to go back to. Click on their logos. You can see videos, reports. It's some great stuff. And be sure to check out the 30th anniversary La Jolla conference. We put together a short video. Okay, Carlos Sarmiento, electricity, natural gas, hydrogen.
So my bet is for hydrogen, simply because it's going to be connected in the whole thing. It's going to be in operations, it's going to be in carbon sequestration, it's going to be when you want to create more clean energy. Okay. It's just, I go for hydrogen. But I agree with Armando, but all the others are going to be present. But I choose Iris.
Manolo, thanks.
Yeah, Jeremy, I will add actually a timing component to your question. When. So actually, the way I see it now, gas is very prevalent for power generation, among other things. And then on electricity, is going to be electricity with solar, wind. Peru is getting very much into that, for example, but hydrogen at the end of the day. So it's going to be a progression.
It's like the last term panel said, define long term. So,
that's right.
Okay, Jorge, you're now a panelist. A, B, or C?
Okay, I'm a big fan of natural gas. I think that the reality of Africa is different from the more developed world, North America and Europe. And it's going to be a long way to energy transition. And it's good that we have plenty of natural gas in the region. So I think that we have to use what we have in the best way possible.
Okay, now the yes or no, and this is going to be tough. I'm going to ask you per country, Saverio, you can choose of the three, but Armando Zamora, is oil revenue, and again, yes or no, is oil revenue a key to Colombia's economic recovery?
Yes, absolutely.
Carlos Sarmiento, is oil
Second to
revenue
none.
a key to economic recovery in Ecuador?
Absolutely, there is no doubt on that.
Manolo, in Peru?
I don't think so. Mining is the key in Peru.
Saverio, why don't you take all three? Is it take them one by one? Colombia, Peru, and Ecuador.
Ecuador, yeah, very much so. Oil development is important. In Colombia, yes, and actually the figure is historically 10% of government revenue comes from the energy sector, oil sector. So obviously important, and kind of expecting taxes to increase for that. And then in Peru, yes, of course, right. Again, Peru is a net exporter of gas products, and so yes.
Yes. Okay. That's it. Week 2 of the La Jolla Conference is in the virtual books. Thank you all very much. Once again, Armando Zamora, Carlos Sarmiento, Saverio Minervini, and Manolo Zúñiga, and to you, Jorge Milanese, for chairing. Great job, Captain. All right. Join us in the virtual lounge. We'll be going there right now. Thank you all.
Bye.